ఇంటర్మీడియట్ విద్యారంగంలో అగ్రగామి మన NSR ఇంపల్స్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్ ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్. ఐఐటి జేఈఈ అయినా నీట్ అయినా తిరుగులేని విద్యా సంస్థ NSR ఇంపల్స్.
Hello students, now for the last class we studied about the photosynthesis. Now let's begin about respiration. Now if you look at respiration is nothing but the process of breakdown of the food material in the presence of oxygen. So you know that the major physiological processes, when you take the major physiological processes within the plant, the major physiological processes which occur within the plant, we generally take into consideration of the two processes, photosynthesis and other one is respiration. The two major vital processes which play a vital role in the physiology of the plants are the two very important processes. One is photosynthesis and other one is respiration. So when you take the photosynthesis here, now in photosynthesis you know it very well, sunlight is being observed, carbon dioxide, water. Now taking that carbon dioxide, water and with the help of chlorophyll and with the help of sunlight, what happens here? There is a preparation of food material. What food material? So we can take glucose, fructose, glucose, right, sucrose and all that. Now along with that you know that water is released. Now in this process what is produced here itself is called as food material. What is produced here itself is called as what? Food material. Now what happens once the plant prepares the food material in the process called photosynthesis? So here when food material is prepared here, it undergoes the process called as respiration. So in respiration what exactly is the process which happens is nothing but breakdown of food material. What happens here? Breakdown of food materials. The food get broken down, as a result there is a release of energy and this energy will be supplied for the entire complete organism for various metabolic processes. So we see one is the food preparing process, the process in which food is prepared, it is called photosynthesis, and in other process what we are trying to do from the food, we are trying to take the energy and that is nothing but what we call respiration. So one is photosynthesis, the other one is respiration. Now if you take this photosynthesis and respiration, now let us see what happens in respiration. I am speaking about respiration. Now in this respiration what is the food produced here? As I told here, as you all know here, it may be glucose or fructose or it may be sucrose. So here the glucose or fructose here, it undergoes the process called as oxidation. That is why respiration is also called as oxidation of food material. Oxidation of food materials. When it reacts with oxygen and finally it releases carbon dioxide and water, and here the food is get broken down to produce carbon dioxide and water, and the most importantly it produces what is called energy, and this energy very much essential for metabolic processes, very much essential for metabolic processes, right. So here we are mainly discussing respiration to produce energy, and that energy is essential to make the organism to live and also utilize energy for various metabolic processes. Now coming to this, now we completed photosynthesis, we are in respiration. Now in respiration a food material is there. Now it will undergo the process called oxidation of food materials. So when you take here, what is respiration now? I say now the mechanism of breakdown of food materials, the mechanism of breakdown of food materials, right, within the cell to release energy for metabolic processes, energy for metabolic processes. So it's nothing but the mechanism of breakdown of the food materials to release energy for various metabolic processes. Itself is called as what? Respiration, or itself is called as cellular respiration. Itself is called as what? A cellular respiration. Now because it happens within the cell, it's called as what? Cellular respiration. As I told you, it can also referred as the oxidation of food material to release metabolic energy. Now generally here what's happening here, for this process what is needed is called oxygen is needed. Now when you take into consideration of the role of the oxygen, in generally if you look at the reaction with oxygen, if you take into consideration, then we have two processes. What are the two processes we can write? What are the two processes? The two processes are nothing but, one we can write respiration and other one is nothing but combustion. One is nothing but respiration and other one is nothing but what? Combustion. Now in both cases oxygen is needed, but you know there is a vital difference between respiration and combustion. Now where does respiration occurs? Let us make differences here. Now respiration occurs in living organisms. Characteristic feature of living organisms. Living organisms, they respire, they breathe. For them the oxygen is very much essential. Now coming to combustion, we say it occurs, it's a chemical, it occurs in man-made processes. Combustion occurs in chemical industries or industries or outside environment. Simply if you burn anything, combustion itself what you call? Combustion itself is also referred as the burning process. Combustion itself is referred as what? Simply a burning process. Simply we gather sometimes all the waste and we simply burn them, and you know for burning oxygen is needed. So combustion is a process which also associated with the oxygen that occurs in industries and outside the environment, anywhere, like burning process itself is called combustion, right. Now this is nothing but a vital process. It is a vital process. Why do you call this as vital process? Vital means this is very important process. Vital means it's very essential process, vital process. Coming to combustion. Now this is said to be a chemical process. Obviously we know it's said to be a chemical process. Now apart from these differences, if you can find out some other differences, like, one second, I'll just get the duster. So, what we are discussing are differences between the two processes, respiration as well as combustion. Respiration as well as combustion. Now, what we have said, vital process. What's the meaning of vital process here? It's nothing but very important process. Respiration occurs in all living organisms, that makes life for the organisms, and it's very vital process, meaning very important process. Coming to combustion, it occurs in industries, any burning process, whatever occurs outside the environment, and chemical process, definitely it is a chemical process where the component is reacting with the oxygen, right. Now, both processes, now it requires respiration also occurs with oxygen, combustion also requires oxygen, that is a common point between respiration and combustion. Now, apart from this, we see in case of respiration, energy is released step by step, So, after one process again energy is released, after some time again with some intermediates again some amount of energy is released. So, step by step energy is released, but in case of combustion energy is released simultaneously. Okay, so here energy is released step by step, but here energy is released simultaneously, right. Now, so these are the differences what generally occurs between respiration as well as in combustion. Now, let us come to the process of respiration. Now, respiration we have two categories. What we say, the process which occurs in the presence of oxygen and the process which occurs in the absence of oxygen. Let us study about the types of respiration. Now, altogether we have two types. What are the two types of respiration? You know it very well. Aerobic respiration and other category is referred as anaerobic respiration. One is referred aerobic respiration, other one is referred anaerobic respiration. Right. Now, if you take aerobic respiration, now this happens in the presence of oxygen, That's why it's said to be aerobic respiration. This all we know as basics. Anaerobic respiration occurs in the absence of oxygen. Right? Aerobic respiration occurs in the presence of oxygen. Anaerobic respiration occurs in the absence of oxygen. Now, if we look at aerobic respiration, it occurs in all living organisms. In all living organisms, we find the occurrence of what we call aerobic respiration. Now, let us make clear differences between aerobic and anaerobic here, but before we talk about differences very clearly here, let us make anaerobic respiration what you find here. Now, it has two categories. Generally, we take a facultative anaerobes, the facultative anaerobes, and other category called as obligatory anaerobes. What is meant by facultative anaerobes? Now, mostly they survive in the absence of oxygen. Suppose if they come in contact with the environment where oxygen is present, but still facultative anaerobic organisms can survive even in the presence of oxygen. But generally they are anaerobes, they survive in the absence of oxygen. But if at all these microorganisms, if at all they come in contact with oxygen, still they have ability to survive. They are called as facultative anaerobes. Now, what is meant by obligatory anaerobes? What is meant by obligatory? Means they survive in the absence of oxygen, and whenever they come in contact with oxygen, immediately they cannot survive. They will die, they will get destroyed, they cannot survive. They are called as what? Obligatory anaerobes. So, very important examples you have to see here, you have to remember. Examples are very important. Let us take Bacillus and other one is yeast. Let us take example Bacillus and other one is yeast. Both will come under facultative anaerobes. Coming to obligatory anaerobes, you can take wonderful example, very important example. We have previous NEET questions on this example. We got the question previously. Like for every alternate paper may have chance of getting the question on Clostridium. So, facultative anaerobes what we find here are Bacillus and yeast. Obligatory anaerobes what we find are nothing but Clostridium. Right. So, these are nothing but different type of organisms. Generally, we say bacteria, fungi, lower trophic organisms, generally they undergo what is called as anaerobic respiration. So, aerobic respiration here, aerobic respiration if you look at, all living organisms undergo aerobic respiration, but very few organisms undergo anaerobic respiration. Now, if you look at aerobic respiration in generally, if you look at, first let us go with the differences here. Aerobic in the presence of oxygen, we say anaerobic is in the absence of oxygen. Aerobic is a criteria for all living organisms, but coming to anaerobic respiration. Now, first let us make differences between aerobic and anaerobic. What is the first difference? In the presence of oxygen is aerobic, in the absence of oxygen is anaerobic. That is a basic thing, we all know it very well. Now, coming to this, I said all living organisms, plants, higher plants, animals, all living organisms, I mean most of the living organisms, most of all living organisms undergo aerobic respiration. Coming to anaerobic respiration, here the microorganisms, what we find here, the microorganisms. If you take microorganisms, here we say bacteria, and fungi and other lower trophic organisms like yeast. In these cases, what you find here is nothing but anaerobic respiration. They survive in the absence of oxygen, right. Now, in aerobic respiration is the one, here if you look at all together, now here each oxidation of one molecule of glucose yield means it yields 36 molecules of ATP. Okay, so oxidation of one molecule of glucose, generally it yields how many molecules of ATP? 36 molecules of ATP. Now, most of the living organisms we find aerobic respiration. Coming to anaerobic respiration, not only the microorganisms, generally lower trophic organisms as I told you, bacteria, fungi, yeast, lower trophic organisms. Apart from that, even you can take germinating seeds, fleshy fruits, and succulents, succulent plants, right. And generally in these cases also what occurs is called as anaerobic respiration. Germinating seeds, fleshy fruits, succulent plants also. Of course in microorganisms most commonly we find, apart from microorganisms, even in plants, in seeds, in fruits and succulent plants, we generally find what is called anaerobic respiration. So here we find aerobic respiration, here we find anaerobic respiration, and remember here it produces very less energy, that is only 2 molecules of ATP, only 2 molecules of ATP, because we find lower trophic organisms we find only 2 molecules of ATP. Here higher organisms we find 36 molecules of ATP. Now, so here if you take aerobic respiration, now aerobic respiration generally we find glycolysis. Aerobic respiration includes the 4 steps. What are the 4 steps you find here? The first one is called as glycolysis. Glycolysis occurs in both cases. Here also the first step what you find here also glycolysis. Here also it is glycolysis, first step. In anaerobic respiration also glycolysis. That means glycolysis is observed in case of both aerobic respiration as well as anaerobic respiration. So whenever you have possibility of getting the question, the pathway, what is the possibility of getting the question here? Whenever you get see the pathway, the respiratory pathway, which is common between aerobic and anaerobic, which is common between aerobic and anaerobic is, what is the answer? You have to take glycolysis. That means for aerobic respiration also first step is glycolysis. For anaerobic respiration also first step is glycolysis. Glycolysis is a common pathway between both aerobic and anaerobic pathway. So here altogether 4 steps as I told you, then followed by second step what you find here, it's called link reaction, right, and then what we find here, it's nothing but Krebs cycle, then followed by electron transport system. The first one is glycolysis, second one is link reaction, third one is Krebs cycle, and the fourth one is ETS, electron transport system. So these are the 4 steps which we find. Remember glycolysis is the one, very important question I am giving you. Question, this is if we expect in the form of question. Glycolysis occurs in cytoplasm. So whenever you get the question that where does glycolysis occurs, remember very important question. What is the question? Where does glycolysis occurs? Glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm, and remember remaining these 3, link reaction, Krebs cycle, ETS, this all occurs in mitochondria. Very important. This all occurs in mitochondria. This occurs in cytoplasm. Very important question this is. Where does glycolysis occurs means in the cytoplasm. Where does remaining 3 steps occurs of aerobic respiration, link reaction, Krebs cycle, ETS. Remember this is also we expect in the form of a question. Where does occur means in the mitochondria. Very important. Now coming to this anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration, it occurs in 2 steps, right. First step is this. Second step, it may be the second step is fermentation. It is of 2 types. Right. The second one is, first step is glycolysis. Second step if you look at, that is called as fermentation. right. Now this fermentation, as a result of fermentation, maybe alcohol is produced in some members, in some cases where you find lactic acid. As a result of fermentation you find alcohol, or in some cases you find what is called lactic acid. Now, so apart from aerobic and anaerobic, if you look at in generally, if you look at, right. So, when you take in lower organisms, only the 2 molecules of ATP is produced. In case of higher organisms, altogether there is a production of 36 ATP. Glycolysis is common pathway for both aerobic as well as anaerobic respiration, but major things, if you look at it, occurs in 4 steps and there it occurs in 2 steps. The 4 steps are glycolysis, link reaction, Krebs cycle and ETS. There the first step is glycolysis and the second step is fermentation. Right. Now, so if you look at apart from these all, aerobic respiration, it takes what you call water molecules are needed, and as a result end products, what are the end products you find in aerobic respiration? Let us talk about end products. The end products which are produced here are nothing but carbon dioxide and water. Coming to the what you call anaerobic respiration, the end products which are produced, they may be, it may be alcohol or it may be lactic acid, because mostly it occurs in the absence of oxygen. So, of course, along with the carbon dioxide, we find ethyl alcohol or we find what is called as lactic acid, right. So, in both cases carbon dioxide is released, here also carbon dioxide is released, but in place of water you find there ethyl alcohol or lactic acid. You know, fermentation is one of the best process most commonly employed in case of industries like alcohol industries and fermented beverages industries. Right. Now, so these are simple differences between aerobic respiration as well as anaerobic respiration. What you have understood here is nothing but, so here glycolysis is a common step between aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Right. Now, let us continue further. Right. So, if you look at here, we have the concept called plants do breathe. Yes. Does we think plants also do breathe? Yes. Plants do breathe? Yes. So, if you look at plants do breathe, meaning here what, you know it very well. So, at the time of photosynthesis, what happens? Suppose if you take, this is a plant. Now, the plant will take carbon dioxide through stomata and performs all mesophyll cells. Let us imagine they are filled with the food. So, mesophyll cells, especially here palisade parenchyma. In palisade parenchyma, what do you find? Chloroplast. Now, chloroplast is the place where the storage of food takes place. Mostly the food is stored in the form of a disaccharide. So, which is a disaccharide? A disaccharide is nothing but a sucrose. This is completely a known story. What we are discussing, does you think plants do also breathe? Yes, they breathe. Now, they take the gas called carbon dioxide. So, carbon dioxide enters through stomata Of course, the plant also takes the sunlight. Now with the help of sunlight, you know, a light energy gets converted into. So we have discussed from the light energy, the photons are absorbed. Photons are measured in terms of quantum yield in case of Emerson enhancement effect. Emerson is a scientist who studied what is called Emerson enhancement effect. So chemical energy means they are nothing but carbohydrates, Ce6H12O6, right. So whenever food is being prepared, so food is always stored in the form of either in the form of sucrose or in the form of starch, right. So you know it very well, sucrose is nothing but a disaccharide. So in first year biomolecules we studied, you know the sugars are, carbohydrates are divided into 3 categories: monosaccharides, oligosaccharides and polysaccharides. Did you remember, right? So monosaccharides, and coming to second category oligosaccharides, there we have disaccharides, trisaccharides, tetrasaccharides and all that. So in disaccharides, you know, we studied what is a very very important note point we studied. The very important note point when you talk in terms of means question getting point, what is that? A disaccharide which is a non-reducing sugar, which is a non-reducing sugar. Which is that non-reducing sugar? It was a previous NEET question, you all know it very well. It is a previous NEET question, right? Which is a disaccharide and which is non-reducing sugar. So you know that very well, we choose the answer as sucrose. So sucrose is a disaccharide, mostly food is stored in the form of sucrose, so it is a non-reducing sugar. Apart from sucrose, food is also stored in the form of starch. So which one is called as a storehouse of energy? Which one is called as a storehouse of energy? Apart from sucrose, mostly the food is stored in the form of starch. So what is storehouse of energy? The answer is starch. Starch is stored form of energy, stored form of the food material. So starch itself is called as what? A storehouse of energy, right. So apart from this, you know it very well, in the process of respiration, we just now studied that energy is produced. First of all, what happens at the time of respiration? Just now we discussed, we referred it as a cellular respiration. What we referred that as? The cellular respiration. The cellular respiration, what produced here is energy. Energy is stored in the form of ATP. It is stored in the form of ATP. Right? ATP. Now what is ATP? ATP. So whatever we get energy, how energy we get it in the cellular respiration? So if you look at in case of cellular respiration, there is a breakdown of C bond here, because generally what is starch, what is sucrose, they all are nothing but carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, how they will be? They will be long chain of CH2 like that, a long chain. You know that they are building blocks of monomers. Building blocks of each monomer is a sugar. Right, we studied in biomolecules, carbohydrates, they are nothing but long chain of monomers. Each monomer is a monosaccharide. Each monosaccharide, it's a sugar. So when I want to break this, and here in the process of respiration, what I do? Now I will break the carbohydrate. A long chain itself is called as what? A carbohydrate. When I break the bond between carbon and carbon, now the bond is get broken here. As a result, what happens here? The energy will be released. That energy will be stored in the form of ATP. Right. So here in case of breakdown of carbon-carbon bond occurs in carbon skeletal system. Carbon skeletal system. Why? Because all carbohydrates, they are referred as a carbon skeletal system. So at the time of respiration, cellular respiration, at the time of cellular respiration, there is a breakdown of CC bond, that is carbon between carbon, whatever the bond is there, that is being get broken. As a result of breaking the bond here, energy is released. That energy is stored in the form of ATP. So here CC bond occurs in carbon skeletal system. As a result, what is stored here is nothing but energy is stored in the form of ATP. What is ATP here? We say adenosine triphosphate. What is this here? Adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate. So we call this as adenosine triphosphate. It's called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So there is a breakdown of carbon-carbon bond occurs. Carbon skeletal system takes place. As a result, there is adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate is produced. Now this adenosine triphosphate, what you find here itself is also called energy currency of cell. Energy currency of cell. So whenever you have the question that energy currency of cell means ATP, storehouse of energy is nothing but starch. There's one more, right? What is that one more? Storehouse of, right? What storehouse of ATP? Whenever you have the question that a storehouse of ATP. So when you take storehouse of ATP, then here you have to remember that's nothing but mitochondria. See the difference here? You are not supposed to get confusion. Energy furnace of cell. Energy furnace of cell. For that also you have to take mitochondria. Okay, so here whenever the question is storehouse of energy is starch, whenever you take the question as energy currency of the cell means ATP, whenever you take the question that storehouse of ATP is mitochondria, energy furnace of the cell is also nothing but what? Mitochondria. So all three questions most of the times people will have chance to have a confusion because all three are related to energy. So storehouse of energy means starch, again I repeat, remember all of you, and energy currency of the cell means ATP, and storehouse of ATP or energy furnace of the cell is nothing but what? Mitochondria, right? So if you take generally ATP, it's nothing but energy storing device we say, generally by taking phosphorus, it is called AMP, that is nothing but adenosine monophosphate. Adenosine monophosphate. By absorbing one phosphorus, you know adenine is nothing but in biomolecules you people have studied. It's called AMP. AMP is nothing but what? Adenosine monophosphate. AMP means adenosine monophosphate. Adenine is nothing but what? Adenosine or adenine. Adenosine is nothing but what? Adenine. Adenine derivative. What is adenine? Adenine is nothing but a nitrogen base. All of you know that nitrogen bases, adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, these all are nothing but nitrogen bases. So whenever adenosine is come and attached with phosphate, one phosphate, it is referred with AMP. Then one more phosphorus is being attached. Energy will be stored in the form of phosphate, right? Then it becomes adenosine diphosphate. Right. Then if energy is stored in the form of one more phosphorus is added, some more energy will be stored. If some more energy is stored, then it is referred as adenosine triphosphate. What it called? Adenosine triphosphate. AMP is adenosine monophosphate. ADP is adenosine diphosphate, ATP is nothing but adenosine a triphosphate. So here energy is stored, whatever the energy is coming, the input of energy is coming in the form of phosphate. That is why we say first only one phosphate is added, it is called, inorganic phosphorus is added, it is called monophosphate, and then some more form of energy is added in the form of phosphate diphosphate, then some more form of energy is added in the form of phosphate, it is called triphosphate. So that is why ATP is called energy currency of the cell, right. Suppose of course apart from this, energy is also stored in the form of NAD, FAD. What is NAD? Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, adenine dinucleotide. So in the form of protons, NAD, we know that we have studied in case of photosynthesis, cyclic and non-cyclic, NAD plus nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD plus converts into NADPH2. Similarly FAD plus, what is FAD plus? Flavoadenine dinucleotide, flavoadenine dinucleotide. This is how the energy will be stored in the form of AMP, ADP, ATP, NAD and FAD. This is how the energy will be stored. They keep undergoing oxidation and reduction in taking the protons and electrons and to store the energy in the form of what? Protons, and mostly in the form of protons. When they undergo oxidation and reduction, they get reduced, again they added with the electrons, so that they act as the sources of storing the energy in the process of both photosynthesis as well as in respiration.